Hey, it's Jack, and this video is called How to Really Be Yourself. Welcome to the channel. If you're new here or you haven't yet, please subscribe. Just hit the subscribe button and then tap the bell notification so you hear of new videos as soon as they come out. And listen, if you've not downloaded my free guide, it's completely free. It's called the Real Freedom Guide. If you're interested to be more yourself, this guide will really help you. It's not superficial, it's real, it's meaningful and deep stuff. And if you haven't, just click the first link beneath this video, download that guide, and I'd love to hear what you make of it. Okay, so this video that I'm going to go into is how to be really yourself. I actually shot this video in a park as I was strolling around London. It's been pretty windy here, so forgive me. Occasionally there's no point can you not hear what I'm saying. There's just a little bit of a rustle in the background, and occasionally the mic rubs on my jacket. But I wanted to go with it because I thought what I had in the video had a lot of goodness, and I think you'll benefit from it from a different perspective on how to really be yourself. So sit back, enjoy the ride, and thanks for being here. One of the things that I wanted to talk about is what it means to come into yourself a little bit more, or maybe a lot more. I was just reflecting recently that so much of my life used to be consumed with ideas and mental activity and honestly a kind of frustrated quality about wanting things to be better, wanting to improve things, wanting to optimize my life, wanting to perfect my life, a kind of unexamined notion of human perfectibility, that there was a perfection project to be pursued, the sort of self-equivalent of the American constitutional, an ever more perfect union. It's like an ever more perfect self, a smarter self, a stronger self, a more emotionally literate self, a self that can deal in more contexts, navigate more circumstances, a more robust and resilient self, a self that can speak more languages, a self that can learn more skills. Now, so many of those things are fantastic, right? One of the most fantastic things about being human is our seemingly innate desire to learn and to grow and to challenge ourselves and to be resilient and flexible and adaptive and learn new skills. I love learning new skills. That was just often rooted in me in a context of mild to moderate frustration, and when I first had that possibility put into my reality, it didn't really make much sense to me because I couldn't translate my optimism and my desire to improve and my desire to make a difference, which are all genuine. I couldn't see that might also have a quality of frustration or a quality of resisting reality. So I wanted to just put that out there because I haven't talked about it that much, and it's been one of the biggest but in some ways most subtle and in the background shifts in my experience. Now, does it mean I never experience frustration? Of course not. Does it mean I never get stuck up in my head or lost in ideas and mental activity? Of course I still do. I tend to notice it more quickly, and I tend to be able to not be ongoingly seduced by it in quite the same way. It's almost like before I didn't know different, now I know different. I might drift, but it's a little easier for me to notice. It's a little easier for me to come back. One of the other things that this parlayed into for me was actually downshifting my attention on certain people's teaching, because I started to notice that the be the best version of yourself teachings, whilst inspiring and whilst having a lot of goodness, I started to realize that maybe they weren't the full picture, and that maybe there were other things at play, and that if you notice that your tendency is towards frustration, is towards just a background quality, however subtle, of I'm not good enough, or life isn't good enough, or this isn't good enough, then certain teachings will probably, if you're anything like me and a lot of my clients, they'll find a place in you to keep you in a cycle of feeling frustrated, right? Even whilst you might be making gains, improving your life in many ways. And it's a difficult discernment, because oftentimes, if I said to you, well, just drop the sense that you or life are not good enough, drop the sense that you need to improve, you might imagine that you'd become passive or lazy or unmotivated. And I want to invite you to run that as an actual real experiment over a long enough time to discern, is that actually true? Because it might be true, it might be partially true, it might be true in some context, it might be true at the beginning, but it might not be universally true. It might be that if you're used to proverbially hitting yourself with a stick to get motivated, that when we take that stick away, for a little time you might be a bit unmotivated, you might be a bit lost, life might feel unfamiliar to you, you might have a less solid sense of self. And I'd invite you to notice if over time you tune into other things and you notice there may be authentic desires that you have not been connected to, or you may notice that your life improves and evolves without you having to have an ideal self projected out in front of you, that your self may know some of the ways that it wants to develop, or that it wants to become a more authentic self. You don't necessarily have to mentalize and concretize ideas about that. It might be that it has its own flow, its own unfolding. Now, of course, there can be lots of passivity and non-engagement sort of wrapped up in spiritual speak, by people saying, hey, just go with the flow, let it be, chill out, relax. And sometimes there may be a non-engagement under that, right? There may be a resistance to noticing what I'm actually feeling, or to noticing I have some repressed anger, or noticing that I'm not really engaged in my life. And by engaged, I mean engaged in the things that your heart cares about, right? That's the sort of best and simplest definition that I've come across for engagement. Are you engaging in your life about what your heart cares about? And I don't presume to know what your heart cares about. It might be flowers and plants. It might be looking after your pets. It might be taking care of your family. It might be building a giant enterprise. It might be creating art. It might be singing a song. It might be all sorts of things. But you'll know when you're in touch with your heart, and you'll know if you really take an honest look at your life, are you somewhat engaged in the things that you want to be engaged in? So I just put that in there as a little caveat, because sometimes, if you're anything again like me in the past, I couldn't hear certain messages from certain new age teachers or spiritual types or meditation types, because I didn't trust that it was the full picture, or it wasn't able to come to me back then in a way that I can receive. Now I have the fortune in some ways that I can receive all sorts of teachings, because they sort of have a place to land easily in me. There's not so much friction or confusion. Whereas back then, if I heard someone just say, hey, just let it be, go with the flow, I sort of heard someone that doesn't have ambition, or doesn't realize how many problems we face and why we might want to improve or change things in the world. There's so much suffering. Why would you want to chill out when you know other people are suffering? Why would you want to sit and meditate when you could actively go and make a difference in someone's life? And I've become much more comfortable with a both and orientation to that our meditation is important for a lot of us, and it may or may not be your thing, but for a lot of us, meditation is the way that we start to drop the inauthentic self, because we start to slow down and notice where we're automatic. All right, we start to value our beingness, our just becauseness, our just relaxing into ourselves. We don't have to go around doing all the time to make ourselves feel valuable or to justify our existence, or to shoulder all the world's burdens. And at the same time, engagement in the world for most of us is a true and authentic path. And being able to, I remember some of my earliest talks when I actually came to live in the US for the first time. It's all about this intersection of beingness and doingness. Most people tend to fall on one side of that. They tend to be so switched on to their own agency and making it happen that it's hard for them to really ever switch off and relax. Or the way that you switch off and relax is by doing quite hardcore, vigorous things. So you relax by running or doing water sports or hiking, but it's sort of like relaxing by doing. There's no real relaxing by being. Relaxing by being doesn't really have a place in you. And then I was suddenly surrounded by a lot of people whose dominant theory, if you like, of social change was meditation, and it really didn't sit super well with me. It's like, I get it. I can look into the research. There are seemingly demonstrable effects, like the field effects of meditation. If you get a whole bunch of people meditating in one area, it does seem to have some impacts. And these are like guys at Yale. These are, serious researchers that have looked into this. And okay, there's something there, but there are so many ways that we can affect social change that to just have that as your dominant orientation to social change doesn't seem particularly we're losing it. Sorry, we're losing it. Doesn't seem like a particularly real approach to me. It doesn't seem like a particularly thoughtful, considered approach. What I've started to realize is that most people have, and I'm no exception to this, we have a sort of dominant experience that we take to be the sort of hallowed experience, particularly anyone that's on a spiritual path, right? So for some people it's love, for some people it's peace, for some people it's non-attachment. Sort of as a background philosophy that, wouldn't the world be better if only people loved more, right? Or wouldn't the world be better if only people were less attached? Or wouldn't the world be better if people could be at peace? And, at one level, of course, absolutely. And at another level, it's sometimes a over-preoccupation with one facet of reality, right? That peace is one aspect of reality, and it may not have everything to say about all the things we might want to be in contact with if we're going to be effective in the world, if we're going to know the issues, if we're going to be able to metabolize multiple perspectives, if we're going to be able to take action within complexity. That there's a lot there. And it might be that what I'm sort of saying, this peak, it's hard to talk to it, but this sort of dominant thing that you might just find someone say, like, that peace is what it's all about, or that it might be that when one person says peace, another person says love, another person says non-attachment, it might just be facets of the same thing, experienced differently, or differentiated in someone's experience. I don't know. And it may be that anytime we have a view that says, wouldn't the world be better if only, that we really want to slow down there and get curious if that's actually true. Do we actually know that that's true? Is that really the whole enchilada? Is there anything being missed out? Because what I've sometimes noticed is the people that most preach peace, they may be incredibly peaceful people and peace-loving people, but it may also be at the expense of something. It may be that I'm peace-loving at the expense of contact with what is messy and inconvenient, and the fact that we're all animals and we have animal drives and we have ego drives and we have difficult emotions like anger and resentment, and that sometimes I'm being peaceful by not really being in touch with that. So it's kind of like a false peace rather than maybe a more true form of peace, which it is in touch with and includes more. Or if I preach love, it's amazing people that preach love. and sometimes if I'm seeing the world in a duality of loving and unloving, it's its own bind, that it's hard for me to be with anything that I consider to not be kind. I run the risk of subjectifying people, that the ways that I experience to be loving or I am loving, I might have a unconscious or conscious desire to make other people be like that they should be loving in the ways that I am. So there's so many possibilities for projection and subjectification, which is when you imagine that other people should be or are more like you than they actually are, that can go in there, and even as a theory of change, sort of like be kind, love more. I don't think these are very effective, even if at some level I wish they were. Most people don't change because they receive an admonishment in some ways, or even a suggestion to be more something. Most people, in my experience, change when they feel some alignment, or they have enough pain that they want to change something, or they feel like you get their world, and from that place they might be open to other possibilities. But if you just say to me, hate less, love more, be kind, this is sort of platitudinous social change, sometimes backed by covert or overt moralism, being moralistic. And most people don't really respond to that, I think, because they don't know that you actually get their experience. They don't know that you get some of their valid concerns as the things that they're worried about, or the patterns of fear that they're in, that have had them assume certain social positions or certain personal positions on reality and what it is and what life is and what's possible and what's not possible. And it's kind of back to walking a mile in people's shoes, but that's actually really, really hard to do if you think about the level of nuance with which we can experience life. So I just wanted to put a few flavors out there of things that have been useful in my world as underpinnings of deeper work and transformation in my own experience, from someone who was a little bit more over there, a little bit more up here, who's learned how to be a bit more over here with myself, and how to be a bit more down here, a bit more grounded and embodied. And I still have a huge part of me which is idealistic, a dreamer, an artist, who loves talking about big possibilities for what we can do together, visions that we have. And sorry, it's probably getting a bit too windy here for you to hear me, but I felt inspired in this moment. I knew this was a risk going in, and I thought, you know what, I'm going to take the risk and see if I can get into something here. I wanted to talk about some of the deeper things that are deep perspective shifts or deep experiential shifts that underpin all sorts of work that I've found sometimes I can take it for granted because in my experience, I'm quite different than I was, and I sometimes forget sort of the scaffolding or the different steps that have gone into that. Not that anyone needs to follow any of those steps or have any of that same scaffolding, just in case any of that is useful to you kind of on your path. So can you be with both being and doing? Can you find a kind of peace, love, or non-attachment that includes the places that you yourself are unpeaceful and unloving and attached, and includes where other people are unloving, unpeaceful, and attached? And what I came into this, I was saying, could you notice, if it was true for you, that you may have some quality of mild resistance to reality, mild frustration, and this will manifest as different things, right? So the thoughts might say, well, yeah, I'm frustrated because I can't pay my rent, or I'm frustrated because people don't treat me right, or I'm frustrated because I keep going to the gym and I'm not losing weight. And, I get it. None of this is about if you're experiencing frustrating, pretending that you're not, right? So we're all into authentic experience, what is actually happening in your experience. But it may be a possibility of looking at, is there a sort of meta-programming or a deeper structure in you that is a frustration quality, that then all different life circumstances come to sort of play out with that, right? One day it's it's a money trouble another day. It's a health issue. And hey, I get it. I know what it's like to have health issues, chronic health issues. I know what it's like to not have money, to struggle to pay rent. I know what all those things feel like in my experience, at least. And I get it. It can be really hard from those places to kind of drop that. And it might not be the time, right? It might be that if you're really struggling to pay rent, what you need to do is actually just put your head down and focus even more on that, and focus on letting some things go that might allow you to prioritize more self and more foundation and more ability to get income. And if you do have the time, space, energy at any point, even if it's after a few months of doing that and kind of getting yourself out of a hole, so to speak, you might want to inquire into, is there something here that just ongoingly is my experience of reality, that there's a little bit of a frustration, there's a little bit of a bristling, a little bit of a resistance, friction. I sometimes talk to people about frictionless reality, and part of that is noticing if there is an ongoing experience of friction or resistance, and what would it take to drop that? Just to get curious, you can always go back. If you've done something for a lot of your life, you'll always have that possibility there to you, or likely will. What's it like to drop the frustration? Like, what would it be like to be today, if I experience frustration, I'm going to sit with it, and I'm not going to imagine that the thing that I'm telling myself is the reason I'm frustrated. I'm just going to imagine that I have frustration. I'm going to be with it directly. I'm going to see if I can put my attention on it, get to know the physical contours, the sensations in my body, the way that the emotion manifests, the mental thought patterns that go with it. Get familiar with all that, so that you might actually be able to relax the pattern and not imagine that it's some change in the external that's the only way of doing that. Of course, sometimes things change in the external and we feel less frustrated. So none of this is about disavowing the external. It's just noticing if there's an internal inner work piece that can allow you more ease and freedom and relaxation to be you on your journey. So I'd love to know what you think about this. Questions and comments below this video. I know this was a little bit more of a sort of philosophical, conceptual video. Curious if that landed for you. Let me know if it did, let me know if it didn't, or if you have further questions. And if you're into what I'm saying here, click the link, the first link below this video, and download my Real Freedom Guide. It's an ebook, and it's pretty relevant to this territory. It's not superficial, it's kind of real and meaningful and deep in some ways. So I'd love for you to get on that. Also, if you do that, you'll be on my mailing list, and then you'll be the first to hear of anything that I do, any upcoming retreats, online programs, coaching offerings, free stuff, all that. So click the first link below this video, download that guide. Again, leave me a comment, let me know what you think. And as always, I'm Jack. Thanks for being here.